Hi, everybody. Um, Hi there. So this is going to be one of the first videos that we're going to watch. Okay, so let's talk about the interface for Adobe Illustrator and what you're going to see the very first time that you open up Illustrator. First off, I'm on a Mac. You may be on a PC. So whatever I'm going to show you here, it's going to apply to both. When you open up Illustrator for the first time, what you're going to get is a breakdown of the different types of file sizes and formats you can use. So let me switch on over and let me show you Illustrator here. I'm in the process of sharing my screen. Let's see here. Okay, so here we are. I have Illustrator here. And this is the very first thing that you're usually going to see when you open up Illustrator for the first time. So you have your basic file sizes going across the top. You have some recent items. So if you were already using Illustrator earlier, you have these recent items here with some of the files that you've already created. You also have create new and open if you want to open a pre-existing file. So just to show you the interface, I'm just going to go here and double click on this letter size format and it opens right up. So this is what we're looking at here. A typical letter size format. And by default, what you see is the basic setup. If you go under Window, under Workspace, this is called the Essentials Workspace. So we're in the Essentials Workspace. So this is the most generic workspace you can have when you're working in Illustrator. To the left, you have your tools. So it's a single column of tools. You have your document in the middle, and to your right, you have this properties window. And properties basically is a contextual menu. So if I change a tool, you can see that properties is going to change. So the context changes based on the tool that you're using. You have your menu to the top, and then you have a bar going across the top as well with a couple more icons. So the one icon you probably want to be looking at across the top here, not exactly an icon, but this menu here where it says Essentials. This is your workspace menu, and when I see Essentials there, I know I'm in this Essentials workspace, which is good. Now, when I work in Illustrator, there's a couple things that I like to do, and that is go into Window and turn on Control. And what Control is a bar, a horizontal bar that goes across the top here. And this bar has some essential information as you work. And it's kind of the same information that you have in properties. I'd like to use this control bar going across the top. It's just something that was in earlier versions of Illustrator. And the nice thing about it is that it shows you your fill. So this first box here where I'm hovering over with the cursor, that's your fill and your stroke. So I have a white fill and a black stroke. And then here where it says stroke, that's the width of a line, and it's set to 1 point by default. So these are the three things that I want to be looking at right away as I start to draw using the tools in Illustrator. Now, some of the other things you probably want to be aware of are the tools in your toolbar. And I'm going to go through these tools in more detail in a couple other videos. But the one tool that I want you to think about right now is your zoom tool. Now, the thing about zoom is I can click on this magnifying glass. Clicking lets me zoom in. And if I hit if I hit Option or Alt on a PC, I can zoom out. So clicking normally zooms in, and clicking Alt will let me zoom out. If I hit the space bar, that gives me what's called the hand tool, which lets me basically move the canvas around. So I can navigate the canvas with this hand tool by moving it around. And then once I release the space bar, it goes back into the zoom tool. But this is a quick tip I want you to remember, is if I'm using any other tool, I don't have to hit that magnifying glass. What I can do is hit Command and space bar.
Okay, check it out.
I'm sorry, what I can do is hit Option and space bar, and that brings me to hand tool. And then if I hit Command Option space bar, I can zoom in. And then if I release the Option key, I can zoom out. So that way I don't necessarily have to ever click on that magnifying glass icon for zooming. I can just hit spacebar, Command, zoom in, and then with my fingers on the spacebar and Command key and the Option key, zoom out. So it's helpful to do that sometimes because it saves me a trip from going into using that zoom magnifying glass tool. A couple other things about the toolbar. If you look down below the magnifying glass, I have the same fill and stroke boxes that you see in that control bar up here. So they're down here below. So a couple quick shortcuts to think about when I'm using this fill and stroke. If I hit X, it's going to flip the tools basically from a fill to a stroke. So X is basically going from a fill to the stroke, and whatever you see on top is the type of effect that's going to be applied to what you're doing. So if I hit X, that white box is on top. That means that that fill is being utilized, and I can double click to change the color. And then if I hit X, it switches to the stroke. If I hit Shift X, what that does is Shift X will actually switch colors between the fill and the stroke. And down below, the fill and stroke boxes are three very small icons. Clicking on those lets you change the color of whatever is the dominant box. If the stroke is on top, that's dominant, and I click that and I can change that color. Next is little box that has a transition from white to black. So that's a gradient. If I click that, it lets me have a gradient for the stroke. And then the next box after that is a diagonal red line. And if I click on that one, that means nothing. So that would mean I have no stroke. Now, whenever I use the word stroke, what that implies is an outline. So the stroke is basically the outline of a shape, or it's the line that you draw with a tool. So the term stroke, and you could also say the outline, they're kind of synonymous. So it's the line that you draw when you're using one of your tools, when you're drawing tools in Illustrator. Now, if I make the fill box dominant by hitting X or just clicking on it, then the three little boxes down below will let you change the color as well. So clicking on that first box opens the color window here, and I can change the color of a fill. Next box, gradient, I can make it a gradient. And then the next box with the diagonal line means no fill. So just to show you how this works real quick with the toolbar, if I go into up here where there's a little line, I'm going to click on this rectangle tool. So I'm just left clicking on that line. This window pops up. I'm going to draw out a rectangle. I'm going to make my stroke for that rectangle black. So when I draw it out, I have a black box. And then when I click outside of it, you can see that outline. So that outline is the stroke. Zooming in here. So if I click on it with one of my selection tools, I can select that. And then if I go back into that stroke outline box in the toolbar, or I can go up into the control menu up here, double clicking it will bring up the color picker, and I can change that stroke color. If I hit X, that makes the fill come to the top. That's the box on top. Double clicking on that brings up the color picker, and I can change that color. So it filled it with the color that I picked. So that's how those two little boxes work with the fill and the stroke. If you want to make your stroke thicker, outline thicker, you can increase the size by going up into the control bar up here and increasing it. And then if you notice in your properties window here to the side, you have the same thing. You have a fill, and it's actually labeled for you, which is nice. Fill box, stroke box, and then the number to the right of that stroke box is the actual width of the stroke. Now, one last thing I want to do before I end this is the toolbar itself. This is a simplified version of the tools that you have here. If you click on these three little dots down below, you can edit that toolbar. And what I like to do is go up into the little menu up here in the upper right-hand corner. These three lines, they call it a hamburger menu. Click on that and then go to advanced. And now I have a lot more tools here. So I'm actually seeing most of the tools that I have available. And then the other thing I like to do, there's two little triangles up above on that toolbar. Click that down, and now I have two rows of tools in the Illustrator toolbar. And what's nice about having the I should say actually two column toolbar is my fill and stroke color boxes are much bigger now and a lot easier to see. So I like having the double column toolbar versus the single columns because it's a lot easier to see. And as we talk about tools, if you ever see a tool that has a little triangle in the lower right-hand corner, that means there's actually more tools there. So you click down, left click, and pop, and then in the pop-up that comes up will be the extra tools that you have there. So that's something to think about if you're trying to find a tool, you don't know where it's at. If there's a little triangle there, there's more tools than you are actually seeing there. So that's something to remember. So the very last thing before we end here, let's just talk about saving your file. So this is really important. As you're working, always save as much as possible. Now, there's two ways to save. You can hit Command S or Control S if you're on a PC, or I can go to File here and I can do a Save As. A lot of times I like to do a Save As. If you hit Shift Command S, it brings up the Save As dialog box. And what I'd like to do is every so often as I'm working, I like to add a version number. So let's say this is a logo that I'm working on. I'll do a save as, and I'll call this version 1. Hit save. Here, I'm just saving it as the default Illustrator format, so that's fine. Hit OK. Now, if I want to save a new version, let's say I decide to change the color of that fill. If I want to quickly save another version, I'll do another Shift Command S, or on a PC, it's Shift Control S. Do that again, and then change that version number to 2. So this is really important while you're working. I can't stress enough. Save, save, save as much as possible. Get into that habit and save versions. Just don't hit Command S or Control S all the time. Try to save as many versions as you can, because when you get into a project and it's very detailed, you're always gonna hit that one snag that really messes things up. The power goes out, the battery on your computer, laptop goes out. You don't want to lose those files. So I really recommend that you save as much as possible. So this is enough now for the interface. So the things that we covered basically were using that control bar, going to window, clicking on control, so you have the extra control bar, understanding the difference between a fill and a stroke, and how to change the color for the fill and the stroke, knowing how you can modify your toolbar to get more tools and to make that fill and stroke box bigger, and saving, which is really important. So this is kind of like your first view of these interface elements. We'll get much deeper. A lot of you may already know this, but if you don't, this is me taking baby steps with you so you understand these interface elements as much as possible.